We are live. All right, very good. All right, hello everybody. We're back with another this week's episode of Goddess Bible Study. Ed Dodge here. We've got Nathan Wilson and we've got Lisa Adams with us right now. See if anyone else joins us. All right, so great. This is one of my favorite topics of the whole thing that I'm doing here. This is one of the Josh is joining us. Great. Here's Josh. Hey there,
Hello,
Josh.
everyone.
We're live right now.
Excellent.
All right, so just getting started. Just starting to say that this topic, Anat and the Baal Cycle mythology from Canaan, is really one of my favorite topics of the whole course, I guess, that I'm going to be going through. This is of all the things I learned in my research, this was perhaps maybe the most shocking piece of mythology and archaeology that I've come across. And I don't really think that the public and the academics have really sunk their teeth into the full. I don't think the public knows about it at all. But I don't think the academics really are, because the academics are very reticent to tie this stuff to the Bible. And so they don't get the full implications of the story. But I'm going to tie it to the Bible. I think that this is central. The character of Anat is central to my entire thesis of the divorce in the Bible. So anyway, this is about Anat. She is like Kali. She is the destroyer. She in the triple goddess scenario. So in the biblical triple goddess is Asherah, Astarte, and Anat. And she is like Sekhmet from last week. She represents total cosmic destruction. She is the most powerful deity on the chessboard in the pantheon. She's the queen of queens, if you will, to make a chess analogy. But she is totally an unstoppable force. And this story, the Baal Cycle, really demonstrates her in her full glory of destruction. So I made this image. I'm going to talk about this for a second. I've been making all the images on ChatGPT. Now it's the AI world we live in now. So, but ChatGPT would not let me do the image I was asking for, because I asked for a description of Anat the way she's described in the text, which is that she's bathed in blood, has a necklace, not of skulls, but of freshly severed heads. So just like Kali, she's dripping blood, and the heads are fresh, and she's got a belt of human hands. That's why we should know that she's like Kali, is because she's described explicitly like that. But they did give me the bow and arrow and riding a lion. But ChatGPT said it would not make that thing. It said it violated the community guidelines. So I thought that was pretty funny. It wouldn't let me copy Kali, but when I said to make her skin bronze, it still wouldn't let me do that either. It would only give me the Kali. Anyway, so yes, this is rare Canaanite mythology because it features all the gods. The Baal Cycle is the story we're talking about. Is rare mythology because it features all the gods we see in the Old Testament. El, the God of the Bible is two gods, El and Yahweh. So we see El on his own. We see Asherah, Astarte, Anat, Yam, and Mot. And so Yam and Mot are like Baal, Yam, and Mot are like Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. So the exact same brothers in the Canaanite world that we see in the Greek world, except that in the Canaanite world, they're rivals with one another. In the Greek world, they're relatively friendly, but in the Canaanites, they're rivals. But it's the same God, king of the gods, is god of storms, is Baal. Yam is like Poseidon, he's the god of the sea. And then Mot is like Hades, he's the god of the underworld, god of death. While El is the heavenly father, the head of the whole pantheon, and he's the namesake of Israel. Asherah is the mother goddess. Astarte is the maiden. So this is the pantheon that we see Yahweh entering in the Old Testament. And then I argue that he stages a coup. He overthrows Baal as the king of the gods, and he becomes the king of the gods for that group of people. But he maintains all the titles of Baal in the Bible. He's the storm rider, the cloud rider, the king of the storms, all this stuff, thunderbolts, all this stuff. All the images are given to Baal. Yahweh gets, and later on. And in the Bible, Yahweh's fighting with Baal, and he's fighting with the goddesses. And so understanding this pagan pantheon and decoding it reveals a lot about how they developed monotheism, because they got rid of all these gods to land on El and Yahweh alone. So, as I was saying, Anat is the destroyer and the triple goddess. And she appears across cultures with different names, always representing the same metaphysical principle, which is ultimate cosmic destruction. She was Sekhmet in Egypt. She's Kali in contemporary India. And she's also Manat in the Quran, which is important when we'll get to the satanic verses in the Quran. She's Anat is conspicuously absent from the biblical text. We know that she belongs in the text because we know she's there historically. She appears in multiple place names and in people's names in the Bible. And she's the consort of Baal, who they talk about a lot in the Bible. So we know that she's there, but they don't name her. And I argue that the biblical writers are not naming her because they're afraid of her, that Anat is more powerful than the biblical God. And to identify her would be to undermine the entire proposition of biblical monotheism. And so while the biblical writers will insult Asherah and Astarte, they can't even name Anat, even to insult her. All they can do is not name her. That's the only thing they can do on the level of spiritual warfare, because they can't defeat her. We learn all this from the Baal Cycle, which is rare mythology because the public is not really aware of it, and it was only recently translated. And the secular scholars are really reticent to tie it to the Bible or make any theological arguments about it. But that's what I am doing. So this text of Canaanite mythology was found in the city of Ugarit, the wreckage of the city of Ugarit, which is a Phoenician city on the Mediterranean coast in today's Syria. It was never resettled. It was just buried over. And it was destroyed in the Bronze Age collapse by the Sea Peoples around 1200 BC. It's a very dramatic story, actually. They found letters that were in like the clay oven being baked when the city fell, and they're like from the administrator of the city sending letters saying, "Send help, send help. The invaders are here. They're outside the gates." And the letters were like buried in the kiln. They like didn't even get sent. It's really dramatic stuff. And the whole city was wrecked in a fire and a battle and all this stuff. And so they found this whole treasure trove of a library with all this mythology in it. And there's other stories too, but the Baal Cycle is the most important one. And so the Baal Cycle, or the Epic of Baal, is central to the Canaanite religion. It's a story of how Baal became the king of the gods. And it's also a dying and rising God story that would be used in agricultural festivals every year. Found on 6 clay tablets written in cuneiform. So one of the things that happens in the Bronze Age collapse is that cuneiform writing goes away. And there's no literacy at all for like 300 years until alphabetic languages get invented in like the 850 BC is when we first start to see alphabetic languages. But the old cuneiform all goes away. And the cuneiform writing was kind of like a rough language. Like it's not very like flowery and poetic. So like the verbiage is all like kind of like, I don't know, it's a little like rough to read. These were written on 6 clay tablets, generally preserved, but there's big chunks missing. It's the longest and most important piece of Canaanite mythology, but not the only one. There's another one that I like called El's Drinking Party, where it's a short story. I would have reprinted it if I had space, but like El gets super drunk. You know, the same God, El of Israel, gets super drunk, and he like defecates and urinates on himself, and he has to be helped home. And then in the morning, he's got a hangover, and Astarte and Anat show up with some plant medicine that they call, no joke, they call it the hair of the dog. And they give it to him, and it rescues him from his hangover. It's like plant medicine that they give him. And I can't believe they call it hair of the dog, because like we still use that term in the modern day for a hangover, you know? It's pretty hilarious. So all the quotes are from this book called Stories from Ancient Canaan by Michael Coogan and Mark Smith. Very eminent scholars in this field, very like well-known guys. It's a very well-known translations that I'm using. So before I get into the story, anyone have anything to say? Any introductions or comments? All right, I'll jump into the story. For the most part, I'm paraphrasing, but you will see some actual quotes in there. Like I said, the cuneiform writing is a little rough, and it's kind of a long story, so it would be too much to print the whole thing. So anyway, in the story, Baal rises to be king of the gods after first defeating his brother Yam, who was god of the sea, in battle. It's interesting. I think Zeus and Poseidon, even in Greek world, were fighting over the throne too. Um, so Anat, in victory celebration, Anat grabs one of Baal's hands, and Astarte grabs the other, and they proclaim him to be king of the gods. Astarte only makes this brief cameo appearance in the story, but this placement demonstrates how high-ranking she is, since she's the queen of heaven, and also that she's very friendly with Anat, and they're really their best friends. They appear in a lot of stories together. Astarte and Anat like ride into battle together on lions, both shooting bow and arrow. They're kind of paired up in the other stories. As I was mentioning, Baal, Yam, and Mot are equivalent to the Greek Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. So Asherah selects the king, and El stamps the decision with his authority. Asherah, the mother of the gods, she plays a crucial role in the story generally, but in choosing who will be the king. Throughout the story, whenever the throne is vacant, El and Asherah jointly discuss who should be the new king. El repeatedly asks Asherah what she thinks, and then he stamps her decision with his authority. This important symbolism demonstrates how the women played crucial decision-making roles in matriarchal culture, something we see in Native American tribes. Women have a voice in choosing the male leaders of the tribe. It's not simply a matter of the men taking power by force. I learned this from Native American tribes. They have a tribal chief and they have male warriors and all this stuff, very masculine cultures. But it's the women who choose who the tribal chief is. It's not like a fight among the men. Something that doesn't really get acknowledged enough. I think that was a very important piece of information for me to learn when I learned that, because I feel like no one ever taught me that in school. Anat, she slaughters the soldiers of Yam, revels in the gore with her heart filled with joy. Anat the destroyer is Baal's sister, lover, consort, and she assists Baal at every turn and makes him powerful. Anat slaughters the soldiers of Yam. She makes their heads roll like balls. She ties their severed hands to her belt, and makes a garland necklace of their skulls. She bathes in the blood and wallows vulva deep in the gore. She laughs out loud, her heart filled with joy, her belly filled with victory. And that's really taken right from the text. This is why we know she's a Canaanite Kali. The scholars describe her as a Canaanite Kali because she's described as tying the hands to her belt and making a necklace of their skulls and bathing in their blood and wallowing in the gore and all this stuff. So now Baal needs a temple built because now he's king of the gods, so he needs a house. They call it a house typically in the story. So Baal and Anat go visit El for permission for Baal to get a house. And Anat's approach is to threaten to murder El, and he responds by giving her what she wants. This is why we know that she is the most powerful force in the cosmos. So now that Baal is king, he needs a temple built. Anat tells Baal that she will speak to El, and who will answer her or else. And this is a quote: "I'll push him to the ground like a lamb. I'll make his hair run red with blood, his gray beard run with gore, unless he gives Baal a house like the other gods and a court like Asherah's sons." And so she goes to visit the encampment of El, her father, the creator of the universe, and she immediately threatens him. She says, "Do not rejoice in your well-built house, El. I will seize it with my mighty arm. I'll smash your head. I'll make your gray hair run with blood, your gray beard run with gore." And this is really remarkable stuff. Like, you just don't see this in any other mythology anywhere. And certainly not in Greek mythology. No one's approaching Zeus. No one's going to Kronos, much less a goddess, and telling them that they're going to smash your head in. Even Kali doesn't even really do this. I've never seen anything like this in any other mythology. Not to the high god, not to a supreme god. It's really ultra violent. I mean, it doesn't get any more violent than this, and it's really evocative in the imagery. Because we imagine El like, the Vatican, like Michelangelo, like, reaching, down from the clouds, all majestic with his gray beard. And here she is, she's going to smash his skull in and make that same gray beard run red with gore. And then what's even more remarkable is how he responds to her. He doesn't get mad. He doesn't get indignant. He doesn't say, "Oh, how dare you, you insolent wench. How dare you talk to your father like that?" No, El, who's known as the kind and compassionate, he takes it all in stride, unconcerned by his daughter's tantrums. He says, El says, this is a quote, I know you, daughter, how furious you are, that among the goddesses there is no restraining you. What do you want today, maiden Anat? So she had threatened to murder him, but he responds with grace and equanimity. He is not angered at his daughter's disrespect, nor does he rebuke her. In fact, he gives her everything that she wants. And this whole scene and repeated scenes, just like it in other stories, give a clear indication that Anat is the most powerful of all the gods. El is the creator, but Anat is the destroyer. So yeah, this whole thing is repeated in other stories. This is not a one-off. Every time Anat approaches El in any story, she approaches him with this same demeanor. And every time El gives her what she wants, and she says, oh, her response then is not thank you. It's your decree is wise, El. Your wisdom is eternal. A lucky life is your decree. It's like she's a mafia extortionist being like, hey, nice liquor store. I'm glad I don't have to burn it all down, it's wise of you to pay me. I would hate to have to, break your knees. So I just think this is really remarkable stuff, especially when you apply it to the Bible. And it makes it clear why Anat is not mentioned. So then Anat tells El tells Anat to go visit Asherah and gain her favor with some gifts. They go to visit her and she's terrified. So Asherah is at her home working with her exalted spindle when she saw that Anat and Baal approaching. The mother goddess was terrified of her mighty children. She broke out in sweat. Her joints trembled. Again, that's taken right from the story. Why has Baal the conqueror arrived? Why has maiden Anat arrived? Would you kill me or my sons or finish off my pride of lions? Anat and Baal are terrifying even to the other gods, even to the mother goddess. But this day they came to their mother bearing gifts. Asherah was relieved when she saw that Anat and Baal were bringing gold, silver, and gifts. She agreed to visit El on their behalf. Anyone have any comments there before I go on? I think this stuff is totally remarkable.
I would mention as well. Sorry, if you want to go first, Joshua, you're welcome to go first.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
I was going to mention about how Anat is either seen as the wife or consort or sibling of Baal, but sometimes even Hadad. And that's kind of important because sometimes Baal and Hadad were viewed as the same god. And though this would be viewed as heresy, some Jews and certainly some Canaanites even viewed Baal and Yahweh being the same god, though smaller in majority. So that could even link up maybe them even viewing Anat as a wife of Yahweh, though that would just be speculation on that behalf.
No, that's not speculation. Actually, we have archaeological evidence for it. I don't mention it in this article, but the Elephantine Papyri is a series of letters that were written from Egypt in the Second Temple period. Second Temple, after the return from Babylonian exile. They're writing letters from an outpost in Egypt to the priests in Jerusalem, and they're signing it Yahweh and his Anat. More than once. There's more than one letter.
I was only familiar with Yahweh and Asherah. That's awesome.
There's Yahweh and his Asherah from earlier time period when Judah was still in place during the First Temple period. But this is Second Temple period, and it's evidence that the Jews weren't even monotheists. Jews weren't monotheists until the Hasmonean Kingdom. They're fighting about this stuff all the way until after Alexandria is established, way late. They were still fighting about polytheism for a long time. So there's multiple letters written from the Elephantine group signing it Yahweh and his Anat at least 2 or 3 times.
Well, that was the point I was going to try to make you when you're reading this and you see El and the family, basically the family here, it's making you think of the Elohim as a council, that we're looking at the council of El here, the Elohim amongst themselves. And think about it in the Genesis story where it says that God created them male, in the image and likeness, he created them, These are, they're cooking, they're going to each other's house or whatever it is. They're going to each other's houses. It's almost like it's not up in the heavens. These gods are living here on earth. They're looking like us. They got hands. They can cut off, decapitate people. This is not the kind of ethereal, otherworldly descriptions that we kind of think about now when we're talking about El as God or the gods. So I don't know. It's providing a quality here of what Elohim probably was thought about in those ancient days.
This is the divine council from the Bible.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
This is them. That's what makes this mythology so interesting.
Yeah.
And why it's so controversial, because when Christians look at this, Christian scholars look at it, they say, yes, this is evidence of the apostasy of the Israelite apostasy, which is true. This is Israelite paganism. But they try to explain away a lot of the divine council stuff. But this is really this is just like reading Greek mythology, except this is the Canaanites. And this is exactly what this is who Yahweh is dealing with, and the priests of Yahweh and the culture of the Yahwehs are doing in the whole First Temple period. Like this is this when they talk about the heavenly hosts and the heaven, and there's a whole bunch of references to it. But these are all the gods of the various planets and stuff for the Canaanites.
And some Canaanites even rejected El because he was too peaceful when they want to worship Anat or Baal instead for their raidings and wars and for their crops and all that, which is pretty cool too.
So the thing that I think too is life is hard. There are tough things that happen. We imagine or make up maybe these deities and these sort of entities or what have you to anthropomorphize and understand the way the world works. And so if Anat is, destructive and, violent and everything, I mean, obviously there was even more violence back then than there is now. And there's more than enough now, right? Life was harder then. And so if they want to, anthropomorphize and try to explain, that there's this spirit that sort of brings that energy into play or what have you, and as well, it's going to be pretty typical for a parent to love their offspring, no matter who their offspring is or how they behave or what have you, right? If you're a parent and your kid is behaving horribly, you still love them, right? So anyway, those are some of the things that come to mind with this. And the other thing I think about is I just think it's so interesting and fascinating across different cultures that they've got such a similar, goddess figure. And not only is it just interesting that they have this same goddess figure, but she's got to be angry and aggressive and violent. And that's not allowed anymore. That's women, the feminine is not supposed to be or not allowed to express in that way anymore. And I think it's something that's missing culturally and something that is, that a lot of women, were exploring and trying to understand what our anger and our rage means and how to give it expression and so on. So I just think that that's also really interesting because, there's no way in, maybe Christianity or whatever, women are not allowed to behave that way.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. I think I agree with you 100%. And I think this is why they get rid of her, because they're bringing women under control. And so you don't want this kind of imagery inspiring your daughters to behave wildly, right? And this is part of why they get rid of her and why she represents the possibilities if this character were to get into the popular culture now, the way I'm describing it, as more powerful than God, more powerful than biblical God. I think the cultural ramifications are utterly massive. And that it would really, they talk about the girl boss kind of stuff in popular culture or Marvel Avengers, all these female characters. And whether it's Kali or Anat, this is so much more powerful than any of that. And takes all of that to the next level. It's such a, unbridled, unrestrained, and like completely threatening. It's the essence of like being threatening to like the male establishment or whatever. Like,
so I was going to say, like, I mean, this kind of expression could certainly be like the backlash to, I mean, exactly what's happening in this country politically right now, right? Like, so it's, like, watch out. You try to like press something down and oppress it and keep it hidden and suppressed for so long. Like, watch out.
Right.
But how's that going to come back? Like, what's going to happen? And I think we're seeing, that in people's like anger and frustration with what's happening like right now,
Sure. No, I think this could be a really potent political symbol right now. Like Anat could be a potent political symbol right now. If that's what I'm saying, if it got out into the popular culture, into the popular awareness, it could be so explosive. And one thing I joke about is like, these archaeologists, they went and like Indiana Jones, they went and dug up the old gods. They went and like dug up the graves, like where all these gods were very carefully buried, and unleashed them onto the public without not having any idea of what they were doing. They went looking for biblical truths, and they went and dug up more than they were reckoning.
And do you think that what we're talking about here also is with Anat is just observing nature in her season changes, just the kind of what we would call like the violence, whether it's a tornado or a tsunami or earthquakes, that this destruction of, which, nature is always seen as the feminine, that is can be completely destructive.
Sure.
But then also how man, and I'm not just talking males, but man and woman, but just the more how we're constantly trying to control the environment, even up to this day, to your point, Lisa, and just like whether it's the climate change, Ed, I know that speaks to you, or like that we think we can control Anat, that we think we can, darken the sun, or we think that we can like build dams and keep her contained. But nature is much stronger than, let's say, the Hoover Dam. Yeah, the Hoover Dam's done a great job thus far, but over time she's gonna win. Like just trying to force back nature. Maybe that's what this is also speaking about too, is that she is Saturn, or El can be so strong, but in the end, nature is much more violent than, and we're constantly trying to control her because we need to live here in peace,
Everything that gets created is ultimately going to be destroyed. Everything that gets created gets destroyed. And that's, if God is the creator and she's the destroyer, that means she has more power than him. But the monotheists always claim that God is omnipotent and God is without a rival. And
right.
So in that theory, then God should be able to make something that's not destroyed. We have no evidence of something that was ever created but not destroyed. Everything that is created gets destroyed. And that's what she's this metaphysical principle about, and why I think it's like a code, and why this symbolism is deeply informative about how the universe actually works.
Yeah, very good.
All right, well, let's finish this up. So Asherah now goes to visit El. This is really funny. It's also a sign of how she's not submissive, and he wants to have sex with her, but she won't do it, and she still gets what she wants. So it's actually pretty lurid. It's pretty funny. Asherah went to visit El the bull and prostrated herself before him. El got excited by his wife's visit. He offered her food and drink and asked, "Does the El, the king's passion, excite you? Does the love of the bull arouse you?" And these, texts are pretty sexual, not as explicit as the other ones I was reading from Mesopotamia, but they're definitely in the same vein. And the other stories about El are also him with like slave girls and stuff. But Asherah says no. She passes off the seduction, but she pleads Baal's case. El replies spitefully. He says something about, "Well, what am I, your slave girl, just out making bricks or something for you? You come here asking something of me and don't give me anything in return." He's annoyed that his advances were spurned, but he agrees to her request and orders that a house for Baal to be built. And Asherah praises him. She says, "Oh, you're very wise." El and Asherah respect each other, but they do not live together. This is important. They got to go visit one another. It's one of these matriarchal marriages where they This is the visiting marriages we were talking about another time, where the husband and wife don't live together.
Well, Ed, you know what I kind of wonder, bringing up the bull, it makes me think of the sign of Taurus, which is spring. It's the time of the most fertility and fecundity. And so if that's brought into the story, it makes me think, of like springtime and fecundity, but maybe part of why that's brought up and she turns him down is maybe because she's like older, right? Like she's an older woman, she might still be the mother, but she might be like past childbearing years and also just being like, I'm done with that.
Right.
Right. And so she goes to her husband and is like, listen, here's what's up.
And it's not like he's not getting any anyway. Like he's got all his girls around.
Okay.
Yeah, because he is the god of passions and pleasure. He likes food and drink and sex. I already mentioned the El's drinking party story.
That right there, when I read that earlier in preparation for this, to say that El is the god of passions and pleasure is knowing what El would later become in the biblical traditions. It's just that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's a big reform, frankly. I think it's a very intentional reform that like they looked, I think I put myself in the head of like a Yahwist reformer in the first temple who has these stories of El, their namesake for their country, for their people. And he's like this drunken buffoon. And they want to rescue El's reputation from this, this bad behavior. And so I actually honestly think that's part of the whole Yahweh reform movement is to shed all of this stuff that they don't like it, that at a certain point they decide they don't like it anymore.
Yeah. And the liking of El with Kronos is quite astounding. It maps really well.
Well, El is definitely Kronos. The Greeks say it explicitly. There's a bunch of texts that mention El is Kronos.
He also borrowed some of the likeness of El and put it in with Zeus, such as the grey beard for the wise man, which is pretty cool. A lot of borrowing went on back then, which is really cool.
Oh yeah, all these cultures. I think there's a common. I think there's a couple different cultures that are have unique stuff that they offer. They got out of India, out of Mesopotamia, and out of Egypt. Basically, just big three that we're dealing with, and then a bunch of like blending in between. In Canaan, this religion right here, we were talking about it offline before we got on the camera. This is from the time period when Egypt ran Canaan, from like 1500 BC to 1200 BC. That's when all of this, all of the Asherah, Astarte, and Anat seem to arrive in the historical record. That's when all these stories are from. And so it's very blended Egypt and Canaanite. And the Canaanites clearly have Mesopotamian influence. So you're seeing all this blended stuff going on. And there's a whole thing to be said about the Canaanite religion from that time period when Egypt was running Canaan. It's all super blended together. I should have included some more in the images in this article. I didn't.
That brings up a question. I don't want to get off track with this, but I'm maybe this is for a conversation offline, but I've always suspected, and I don't know if this is true, but Canaan in and of itself, are you finding a lot of imagery around dogs? You mentioned the dog hair in that earlier in the story. Are you seeing a lot of dog images around Canaan or anything? I'm curious.
Well, Isis has a dog that's with her, a dog-headed god that's a psychopomp.
Well, you have Canaan, which is, you think about like the canine tooth, and you have in the constellation of Cancer, there's a lot of dog words in Cancer. You have in the New Testament the Canaanite woman, where Jesus says, what can I take the bread and give it to the dogs? There's something about Canaanite culture and dogs, and I don't know where to map it to, but I'm curious. When you mentioned that with the dog's hair, I was like, whoa, there it is again. There it is again.
I don't know if Canaan and Canine have any connection. Is there a connection between Canaan and
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised at that root.
Well, a lot of Canaanites were shepherds too, and a lot of shepherds used dogs for herding their sheep. So I'm pretty sure that, because I know we're big shepherds, and I'm pretty sure there were some depictions with them with dogs. But some even would say Set, for instance, with a donkey head, some would even insult him, call him dog-headed as well, and that could be an association with that. Some associated Set with Yahweh, so it's.
I think there's something there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this dog called an Anatolian Shepherd, this great big dog, big fierce dog that's still around, a modern breed, but they say it's the same dog that was in the book of Job. Anyway, I had a bad run-in with an Anatolian Shepherd. It totally beat up my dog and bit me, and I got all torn up. It was a gigantic dog, and my dog got this huge fight with it, man. It totally got her ass kicked. Another mention about dogs. The male Kadash, the transgender priests, they get described as dogs in the biblical text when they're insulting them. The biblical writers use dog as an insult for the male Kadash priests. I don't know if that's relevant or not relevant.
You see these exchanges across culture where, and you have that story in Genesis regarding the Tower of Babel, where it was the confusion of tongues. For example, like Kali, Kali might mean something bad, but in other languages it's Kali means good, or there was just like real confusion, and you wonder. You often see this, like, for example, to the Greeks, the pigs were holy. That's what was offered to Demeter. But in Palestine, the pigs are dirty, and it's not something you want to, have around you. They're defiling. And so you almost see like there's these cultural differences where you'd almost pick the opposite, like you're on different teams.
Well, they do that. Yeah, that's definitely for sure. Some cultures, neighboring cultures, will intentionally make opposite dietary choices just to
separate themselves.
They're different from the other guys.
Yeah.
Even some Canaanites rejected pork too. Some even ate it too. There were even some small fringe vegetarian Canaanite sects too, which is pretty cool, which I reckon would have carried on with the Essenes and Jewish mystic sects that were either pescatarian or vegetarian too, which is pretty cool.
All right, so back to the story. So Baal does get his temple. There's a whole thing with the temple, actually. There's a whole other god who's like a blacksmith god. It's kind of a whole long thing, which I skipped over. So Baal's house was built of silver and gold with Lebanese cedar and the purest lapis lazuli. Baal then went on a victory tour, dispatching his enemies and sacking many towns. And Anat's with them, and they go slaughter a bunch of people to celebrate. It's kind of bizarre. Baal and Anat both seem to kill humans for fun, and this seems unique among the comparable kings of the gods. It's another thing that I don't feel like I see that in other mythologies where they're out just wantonly slaughtering humans just for the sport of it. I don't know. It seems like a pretty rough religion.
Is this the first time humans are mentioned in this whole dialogue here that we've been talking about today?
No, before Anat was slaughtering humans before and making jewelry out of them.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So then the story goes on. Baal sits on the throne, and this time he decides to challenge Mot, the god of death, for total supremacy. But the gods rule against Baal and say that Baal must die. So this is obviously getting into the cycle of life stuff. So Baal was enthroned as the mightiest of the gods, but then he decided to challenge his brother Mot, the god of death, for ultimate supremacy. The gods do not accept Baal's blasphemous impertinence, and Baal is ordered to submit to Mot. Baal had overstepped his boundaries, and even the gods must submit to death. This is similar to the story of Inanna that we had read about a couple weeks ago. She faced the same judgment when she tried to overtake the underworld from her sister. And even the gods must obey their limits, and none are more powerful than death, except for Anat. So Baal was terrified when he heard the order, and he was afraid, but he did obey. But before Baal went to his doom, he has sex with a young cow who bears him a child. And the scholars talk about this a lot. No one seems to know quite what's going on with this whole scene. But again, back to the fertility, bull, cow, fertility stuff for sure. Beyond that, it's not really clear. So Mot kills Baal, and the Lord of the earth perished. Death came upon the land, and fertility vanished. So again, classic cycle of life story. Fertility vanishes from the land. There's famine. So El comes down from his house in mourning and lamentations, covering himself with dirt, wearing a sackcloth in the ritual fashion. El cuts his skin with a stone, makes incisions with a razor, and cuts his cheeks and chin. He raked the length of his arms. He plowed his chest like a garden. He raked his back like a valley. Baal is dead. What happened to the people? So El is very concerned about the fates of the human.
Hold on, Ed. Do you think that has anything to do? Sorry to interrupt.
No, I was going to stop here.
Right above that, with the cut with the razor with El.
Yep.
Does that have anything you think to do with foreshadowing circumcision?
Well, I don't know about circumcision, but I was going to say that these kinds of funerary rituals still exist today. Some people will, like, especially in Asia and stuff, this is considered primitive by Christian European standards, but you still see this kind of stuff where people will scratch themselves or bleeding, or scratch their back with a whip, and wearing the sackcloth and covering themselves with dirt. These kind of rituals are still around. It's just that Christians see them as primitive.
Ritually shave as well and wash as well. The Egyptians would shave everything off as well. So
part of what is happening in a situation like this is it's a big initiation to lose someone you love, especially if it's, say like your offspring, or if it's your parent, or, say your partner. This is a big initiation. And so what a lot of, ancient and primitive cultures would do and indigenous peoples is they would embrace pain. They would even sometimes seek out pain because of the transformation that pain brings on. And if he's in a state of grief and mourning, then it's like he's going to go all in on this grief and mourning for the loss of his beloved son. And maybe even that's part of him sort of offering up, as like sacrifice parts of himself, because he's concerned about the people. And maybe he's even thinking, did I do the right thing? So there's a lot that's going to go into this sort of a practice. And it's, like, people will often ritualistically, and I think of like, what a sun dance is in Native American culture, people will ritualistically undergo, physical pain or inflict it upon themselves in order to go through a sort of like a peak ritual experience and a transformation.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Very good. So Baal is gone. Baal is dead. So Asherah's sons compete to be the new king, but they're no match for the mighty Baal. They have one of them like sit on the throne, but his feet don't even touch the floor. There's a few of them that like are vying for the prize. But Anat, she went hunting until she found Baal's body. She also cut her skin with stones and covered herself in sackcloth. When she was done weeping, she brought Baal's body back to Mount Zaphon, and she buried him. Anat made great offerings and sacrifices. Like the heart of a cow for her calf, so was Anat's heart for her brother Baal. Wow. Then we get into the most powerful part of the whole story. Anat finds Mot, the god of death. She sought out Mot. She grabs Death by the edge of his clothes, raised her voice, and demanded, "Give me back my brother." Basically going to Hades and grabbing him by the shirt and like shouting at him. But then Anat, this is a quote, Anat seized El's son Death. With a sword, she split him. With a sieve, she winnowed him. With a fire, she burned him. With millstone, she ground him. In the field, she sowed him. Birds ate his flesh. Fowl consumed his parts. Flesh cried out to flesh. So this is like an agricultural ritual. She takes Hades, equivalently, cuts him in half with a sword, grinds him up with a sieve, and does some stuff to him and feeds him to the birds. Again, totally wild stuff.
But this is also very metaphorical for what happens with death. Like, before we were burying people or whatever, or like, if let's say you were out wandering in, the wilderness and you died, a lot of those were the kinds of things that would happen, right? So again, we're sort of bringing in this idea of her as maybe partially representing nature. It's very powerful.
It's powerful stuff.
I mean, we usually think about the gods being immortal and not being able to die, and yet we have God's dying here and then being restored to life. This is like on a whole nother level of thought than how most people think theologically these days.
But this still goes into the cycles of nature. The cycle of nature is life, death, and rebirth. And it's life, death, and rebirth. And it's over and over. That's life. That's, to live is to die. So so when something comes back to life, in whatever mythology you want to follow, it's all kind of pointing to that same thing about nature. And in most cases, and in many, many cultures, this idea of this male deity or God coming back to life is almost always the cycle of the sun that we are witnessing, in which case its rebirth occurs like just right about or just after literally winter solstice. And the goddess is the one that gives birth and, over and over again to the god who's her son and her consort and all of those other things. So this cycle, we see it everywhere. And then I guess the way Christians decided to use it was to decide that Jesus's birth was at the same time of year as the rebirth of the sun, right? And so that's lost on Christians, I think, generally speaking.
Well, just what you just read there, Ed, what Anat did by going into Hades and destroying death by death, that's that's how many Christians would discuss Christ going into hell and taking captivity captive. I mean, that's what a lot of the hymns of Easter or Pascha are about. Is that you could take that, probably go side by side with hymns of the church, And this is how many thousands of years ago?
1200 BC.
Yeah, amazing.
Also part of initiation rituals for the rebirth, also for divination rituals for one to become divine as well, was the rebirth of self, a self-sacrifice for an old life to be reborn mentally or spiritually. Something that Christians don't understand. Even the meaning of repent means to change within or to change your mind.
Yeah. Or to be born again. Yeah, they all come out of these mystery religions. All the goddess religions are the mystery religions, and they're all just different variations on the same kind of theme.
Yeah.
So after that, Anat destroys death in dramatic fashion, and Baal is restored to life. This brings Baal back to life. So Anat is the one who puts Baal on the throne. And this would have been done in agricultural rituals. El was glad. Baal was returned to his royal throne, and he dispatched his rivals. Anat again demonstrates her raw power. The other gods must submit to death, but not Anat, who destroyed him easily. But Mot does come back. In the 7th year, Mot, apparently not permanently dead, approaches Baal, and they proceed to fight anew. He says, I should have quoted it, but something about, you embarrassed me. You brought me shame, Mot says, and now Mot has got to restore his glory. So they go fight. Mot was strong, and Baal was strong, and it goes on for quite a while. But then the sun eventually intercedes, telling Mot not to kill Baal, or surely El would overturn him. So Mot was afraid and finally declared, let Baal be enthroned on his royal throne, the seat of his dominion.
I found the sun's appearance, the sun being mentioned there. What do you think that's all about?
I mean, he's one of the other high gods. So they've got like the 7 high gods, the 5 planets, the sun and the moon. And so those are the gods with real authority. So the sun's one of them.
Some Canaanites even believe that El had a dad like the sky god and all that sort of stuff as well. They're whole different variations of the Canaanite beliefs.
Yeah, and also you think Helios, but but also there towards the end of that story, Anat is essentially enacting the Isis Osiris story, right? Sure. And she meaning Isis was, a priestess of Ra and a sun goddess and things like that. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It all overlaps. So, Baal is enthroned above all, but not without the crucial assistance of his sister Anat. With Anat at his side, Baal is virtually untouchable among all the gods. His rule is supreme. So imagine that. If you're the king of the gods, you've got Anat as like your wing girl standing aside from you. Like no one is going to challenge your authority whatsoever. And that's the world that the priests of Yahweh are going into. That's the coup that they're going to stage, is to overthrow not just Baal, but Anat as well. And it gives you a little more appreciation for what the guys at the Yahwists are getting up to when we get to that part of the story. Anat displays none of the subtlety and magic of Isis or the sensuality of Ishtar, but there's no denying her raw power. Her mastery of death and ability to drive terror into the hearts of the other powerful gods puts Anat into a category of her own. She is the most powerful deity in the pantheon, ultimate cosmic destruction. She has checkmate power over all the gods. All right, so that's it.
She was definitely feared and powerful god. Like I think, because I just found out today what we were speaking to off camera, and with regarding the Egyptians, pharaohs, they controlled the Anat worship, which is pretty interesting. I think that shows a lot of fear and respect for this deity as well amongst even the pharaohs, and likely introduced by the Hyksos, which usurped the Egyptian throne, a Canaanite tribe, whose main god was El.
Yeah, I think these are Hyksos gods too. I totally think that they're downstream of the Hyksos for sure.
Mm. The not mentioning her name in order to eradicate her. This this kind of tradition, whether it's like in that sense of not of well, you have it with like Yahweh, you wouldn't mention the name out of respect, but then you also have it here where you wouldn't mention her name in order to basically forget her, or you have those stories about blotting out the name so their memories are forgotten. This is all very interesting plays on invocation here.
Blotting out the names. It's exactly what's going on here. And I think it's really powerful recognition and and then to bring her name back. It's spiritual warfare. To bring her name back and put it in the culture today is it's much of a spiritual battlefield as it was back then.
There was another thing we discussed off camera too, because you're more familiar with the scenes. I'm only familiar with one scene in the Bible, in the book of Judges 3.31, with the Sagma, son of Anat, or Anath is mentioned, which is obviously a pun intended on honoring of this goddess as well.
I will say that as somebody who is a goddess dedicant and is, studied and looked at a lot of goddesses in the last few decades, I had not come across her before. So prior to getting on here today, I just, did a teeny little bit of research and saw some interesting things. I mean, much like a lot of other goddesses at different times, she takes on sort of like, maybe fertility and sensuality, that sort of thing, which a lot of goddesses do. And then also it was said that Astarte, which I know as Astarte, who's the one that comes up more than Anat does, that they were sisters and one was light and one was dark.
Yeah, totally. And the goddesses are totally fluid. I mean, that's central to one of my arguments, is that all these goddesses are totally fluid with one another. They can swap names, swap characters, willy-nilly, as much as you want. It was what makes them so confusing to study and kind of tough to pin down if you're a scholar. But yeah, like Sekhmet in Egypt was as much a goddess of healing as she was a goddess of destruction. And she was a goddess for doctors and stuff. So like they have these inverted characters and they're fluid. Very much so.
Well, yeah, and if Anaita of the Persians, if she's even related to Anat, because I mean phonetically it sounds very close, she has a much more softer tone than Anat does here. So
also, thanks for telling me about that source with Anat and his Yahweh and her Yahweh, or Yahweh and his Anat. That's cool. I was only familiar with the Shera one, so I was great to hear that, because I'm going to use that sort. I know that the name is popular in the Jewish people as well, amongst the Zionist movement, Anat, which is pretty cool amongst females.
Yeah, this is some pretty fascinating stuff here, Ed.
What I should find here, let me see if I can find this real quick on my computer. Some of the images I've got. Hold on. I don't know if we're going to find it real quick here. Yes. I've got too many images on my computer. Can't find it real quick. But I wanted to find some of these images of Asherah.
Yeah, I would love to see those. So in animism, there is this concept or idea that different places have their own spirits, like mountains can have their own spirit. A body of water can have its own spirit, this kind of thing. And so I think about that region, and I think about especially like Syria, and all of the war and the wars that have taken place throughout that area over thousands of years, typically over religion, right? Mm-hmm. But I think of like the spirit of Anat, like being very active through the people. Through the people, that kind of spirit or that energy or entity that resides there, that is like her expression, her energy of like anger and destruction and that sort of thing, like that is alive. That is happening, and it's been happening. She's still there. Whether she's been named or spoken to or spoken of or not, she is doing her thing in that region.
I think also to bring respect to the females as well, because a lot of raiding went on back then. So in other words, fear the divine feminine, don't just take advantage. You might get wrathful payback from the gods, and if not from Anat. And also the tributes that would be given to these gods and goddesses as well. People don't take that into account. Massive amounts of tributes they gave to the gods first before they took for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was absolutely an idea of serving them, like literally serving them, bringing them food, and which would maybe turn into what we would later call sacrifices. But the way these stories are depicted, it's like the gods dwelt among men, and men were bringing food to the gods, literally feeding these entities. That's how I constantly hear these stories, is that they were here on earth, the gods were here on earth, and we were interacting with them, and they were much more powerful than us.
But that's still the case, though, for a lot of people, a lot of practitioners and animists, is you feed your ancestors, you feed your gods, you feed the spirits, you feed the land, and in so doing, you have a reciprocal relationship, and those things watch over you, so you feed them, and that they will continue to do so.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the art I'm talking about.
Okay.
This is in the Louvre. It's from Egypt, from like the Canaanite time period I'm describing, and this is they call it Kadesh, which is like the same name for the priestesses, or it could also be Asherah, but it's very clearly Canaanite and Egyptian mixed together. So the goddess, she's got all the stuff. she's got in her right hand, she's got flowers, a lotus or something. In her left hand, she's got the snake. On her hair, she's got the hair of Hathor. We were talking about that last week, where it's a sign of how beautiful it is. She's got the eye of Ra and the bull horns. That's a symbol of the eye of Ra. She's riding a lion. On her right is a god, an Egyptian god of, I think his name is Min. He's obviously a fertility god, as you can see here from his extended member. And then on the god on the left is a Canaanite god who's like a death god. I think his name is Reshpesh or something. And he would send arrows that had like diseases and stuff. And you would pray to Reshpesh to like not hit you, let your arrows fall on the other guy. And so he's like a death god. So this is like a full cycle of life Trinity thing here. The goddess with the male, with a god of life and a god of death, riding a lion with the serpent and all the Egyptian symbolism, the sacred flowers, the whole thing. And then down below, more Egyptian writing. I believe this is Anat, is one of these goddesses, but I could be wrong. There's other ones here we have here of let's see. No, that's not it.
Another name could be Atum as well. I had to double check the name.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Mm-hmm.
I think it is Atum. I want to. I think
Masturbated the world into existence.
There's such a when I look at these things, I can't help but to see certain things. When you think of Atum, you think of autumn. When you see the lion, you think of Leo. When you see Asherah there, Asher means to rise, and she's wearing the moon with the sun on her head.
That's actually those are horns.
The horns, but that also depicts the moons too, the moon as well.
True.
And so
And
one of the things I think is interesting, just astrologically, when we look out in the skies and we're talking about the seasons of dying and rising gods and rebirth, is that when and she's holding wheat there too, like the Virgo zodiacal sign in the sky, where she's holding the wheat, Spica. When that star rises, and there's a new moon, when Virgo is rising in like late September, October, that's and there's a new moon. When she's rising in October, yeah, that is when Persephone, or Demeter, that whole myth of her going into the underworld. So when she's rising in the east, and then all the way up until March, when Spica comes back down and touches the earth again, when Persephone, which is Virgo, touches her mother again, and there's a full moon, we have the whole planting and season and reaping motif right in their sky. And I wonder if I might not be articulating this really well, but I wonder if that's not what we're seeing depicted here, was them looking at the goddess rising, and that it's a time for reaping. And then you have winter. And then when she comes back down and touches the earth on the other side of the expanse of the sky, she's reunited with her mother, and it's time for spring again. And I don't know if that's what we're watching here, and if that's the worship of the goddess being depicted in these symbols, because it seems to scream at me, because you have the moon rules Cancer. Cancer stands on top of Leo, and that's what we're watching right here, So I don't know. These are the things that I see when I look at these ancient images.
I think the serpent in her hand, the snake in her hand, is really important because there's so many images of goddesses, and including, Inanna and Lilith, where they're holding the serpent.
Super common.
Yeah, and usually with like some sort of animals underneath or at their feet. And, the other hand's usually got something in it, not necessarily like flowers or what have you, but the serpent, stands for so many things. It stands for knowledge, and it stands for, shedding and rebirth and regeneration and health, and kundalini and sexual energy and like arcane wisdom. It stands for so many things.
Well, that also speaks to the moon, because the moon does this very snake-like movement in the sky all the way up and down the ecliptic. So
and
yeah,
Venus is a flower.
Mm-hmm.
Venus is, when you track where Venus and the sun make a connection, it forms this flower. It's beautiful.
Does it really?
Yes, yeah. It's so cool. It's amazing.
Yeah,
I've never heard that one before.
Each planet has its own, creates its own geometric pattern with all the planets, you know, but especially with the sun. And you can watch how they go, their retrograde cycles, and it will create a pattern, and they're all different. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's really cool.
You can easily find that on a Google search somewhere.
It's really cool to see this image. Did you say you had 2 images, Ed?
No, I've got more.
Notice the phallus on who is that on the left?
He's Egyptian god.
I'm forgetting his name.
Min, I think is his name.
He's got the 2.
Atum is one as well.
Noon. I think it is Noon. No.
I'd have to go grab a book.
No. It's Ptah. Is it Ptah?
Oh, Ta. Mm-hmm. Could be.
I think it's Ptah.
That might be it. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, he's quite erect.
It's fertility, yeah.
And you see the wheat above that.
By masturbation as well, or the universe, or whatever, however it was. I forgot the exact myth, but that was one myth associated with that god as well. And so pharaohs would enact that, and they would rub one out in the Nile River, and people would watch that. So they were basically role-playing their gods. Fertility ritual as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously, a fertility ritual. That's so cool.
The goddess on top of the lion, though, that goes everywhere in the ancient world. Everywhere.
Gnostic Christians would have got a kick out of that. They would have seen that as Sophia stepping over Yahweh.
Yeah.
Pretty cool to see that.
I got another one here.
How old is that? That's obviously BC era. Is that from 800 BC or a bit older?
Hold on. No, these are from the time period when the Egyptians were ruling Canaan. This one's not as clear.
But it's the same image.
Same image. Yeah.
And I've got a third one, but it won't play nicely.
That one's cool, though.
Yeah, these images where they're holding 2 things at once, often it's the same thing that they're holding in both hands. But here she's holding 2 different things, holding them in tension. But that's another image that goes all over the world.
Yeah, her left hand is scratched out. You can't see what's there. It looks like there's an outline of another god there, but you can't really see it.
Yeah.
But clearly the same god, the same fertility god on her right. Totally. Same hair, same eye of Ra.
The solar disc. Yeah.
Same lion. A really even cooler lion.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty badass. And this is limestone. And so, yeah, these are predate the Bronze Age collapse. These are 1300 BC, something like that, 1400 BC.
So in tarot cards, in the major arcana, card number 8 is strength. And strength is always depicted as like a woman with a lion. So this iconography has been around a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the goddesses and the lions. Clearly, it's a really interesting, and I think there's a lot to be said about it because, like, the lions, it's the females that do the hunting. The females all live together in a pride. The male kind of comes and goes. They can let one male fight amongst themselves and figure out who's going to be the alpha male, and then, but the ladies all seem to like be in charge of their own business, frankly, and they hunt their own food. They let one male stick around for the privilege, but beyond that, they're like, get out of here, fools.
Yeah, primarily it is the female lions that do all the hunting. The males are kind of just there to for fertility.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing, do you reckon that could also depict also one is not just to share. I reckon that could also depict Anat because she was also seen as a daughter of Ra in Egyptian mythology.
Well, this other one that I've got is called Anat in my files, but it just won't play nicely on the computer because of the wrong file type. So I can't show it to you.
Can you go to that image that we had up before one more time?
Let me see.
And if you lost it, it's okay.
No, I got it. Just clumsy.
Okay. Yeah, well, you know, pictures of Baal often look like the depiction on the right from Canaan. That looks like Baal and the statuary of Baal.
Sure, no, it's definitely Canaanite, yep, and it does.
So does the left in some way, because a lot of Baal has this sort of depiction, and he's holding a lightning bolt.
Yeah, he's holding a
yeah. I just clicked on when you mentioned about the reference on things. I'm like, cool.
Very Jupiter, very Thor, right?
Yeah, so like I couldn't remember who was on her left, our right. So in that other picture that you had up, who's scratched out because it might have been damaged because Baal was so, he was.
Also, the Christians made a point of it. They went around and scratched the faces and broke the noses off of pagan statues. That's why they've all got their noses broken off, because Christians went around and did it on purpose.
And Islam would do the same as well. Like something with the Abrahamic faith, so bad for it. Even prehistory Jews would do this as well to Baal statues. They even put a toilet seat next to one of them or a toilet.
Iconoclasm is a movement in and of itself that I think corresponds to this abuse towards the goddess too, because really the arguments for iconoclasm are a lot of the arguments of why they're constantly trying to keep the feminine out of the theology for man. I mean, it's constant destruction of material, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
So divinizing material in any way is bringing her back. So it's this almost like that snake figure. She comes and then she leaves and persecuted. She comes, is loved, and then is persecuted. There's a lot to all this.
With some goddesses, you even find them being called the harlot and also the virgin, being symbolic for being loved and hated. So,
I love that we get to talk about this stuff and dive so deep. And I really appreciate the opportunity to learn about a goddess that I'd not been exposed to. I was sort of like feeling like, well, I'm not doing my just due as a priestess to not have met this goddess until today.
I think this story is just amazing, Ed. Just the context that it's provided, not only with Anat, but just with El. I mean, rarely do we hear this backstory of El. It's not very well known.
No.
So
it's nice.
And I don't think that the secular scholars are doing it justice. Yeah. I wish I could show you this other image. It's really not cooperating. This other image is excellent.
To hear about a loving Father God is a nice change of pace too. I mean, frankly, because I wasn't even raised religious, and I, still sort of carried that sort of like, like what's God going to do? And he's watching, and what's he going to, and he, punishing and that sort of thing. And so I think El seems like he's a pretty nice guy, but, and you hear about like Kronos and, like Saturn or whatever. And their mythology is that they were kind of like punishing and
not originally though. I mean, okay. Saturn was the ruler of the golden age, and so it was a time of bliss, like Garden of Eden stuff. So you can kind of see this is like maybe that very old Saturn which was probably more loving, and then what happens to him? His son comes and usurps his authority, and then the ages change. But yeah, I this point you're making is like of a more loving God. You see El here, and when you're thinking Saturn, you're like, oh, how does this line up? But then Saturn also has this quality of being also a stern father, like in astrology. He's a malefic, but over time, he treats you better over time if you learn his lessons. So it's like
every time Saturn transit, and I'm like, shit, I'm in it, and like Saturn's doing the thing to me, and then I get through it, and I'm like, oh, thanks, Dad.
Well, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Also different versions of El as well, and same with Yahweh as well. We had different tribes stealing idols of El and Yahweh as well, or smashing their idols and saying ours is better. But we had some El worship that rejected human sacrifice, while others did do even child sacrifices there. Well, not all. We did this to Yahweh as well. They did it to Baal and goddesses as well, but some goddesses also rejected as well. Some Asherah worship rejected this practice, some favored it. So it's pretty interesting how we see these tribes all conflicting with each other with all different beliefs. Right, we see this with Judaism.
No centralized authority. I mean, that's the thing that the Hebrews bring, and then the Christians bring, and then the Muslims is centralized authority. We'll tell you how to believe. Yeah. You're not allowed to go down the block and do it yourself. You got to do it our way, or we'll punish you. And it's been like that for a while now.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been good.
Yeah, this has been a good one.
All right, very good, guys. We'll end the stream here. All right, Edward Dodge at Substack.com, Goddess Bible Study, or at gmail.com if you want to reach out. Please like and subscribe, all that, yada, yada, yada. All
there
right.
It is. Good evening. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you so much, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Lovely chatting, Edward. Blessings.
All right.